conversation a little bit. How familiar are
Yes.
you with Azure?
I'm absolutely newbie, so
Yeah,
I heard the phrase a lot,
yeah.
and it's connected to cloud,
Hmm.
but I never used it. But I figured out that we got an subscription, so I think I can make an account on Microsoft and also use the resources
Yeah,
for, I don't know, $100 or $150
that's
or so.
really nice. Do you have
So
MSDN, right?
yeah, so we have some. Yes, we
That
got you told me about the MSDN
yeah,
subscription,
yeah.
and yeah, was a very good hint.
I
Yeah,
tell you, it's amazing. Have you seen the benefits that you have?
yeah, and also the plural site
Exactly.
um, for 3 months or so,
Yeah,
free plural site. Yeah,
yeah. The one that I have is for a whole year.
yeah.
And also, let me show you this, if you allow me. MSDN benefits, or they call it Visual Studio now. So Visual Studio benefits for Microsoft. And if I log into my own account, probably have just my lower end. This is really, really great because you see some of the benefits. Now you get Azure monthly credit, you get Azure pay as you go. Education wise, because this is my MCT account. Yeah, so yeah, because I'm a Microsoft certified trainer,
Mhm.
so it's showing what I have as MCT. But one of the things that you can look on yours under education, Sven, is there may be an option. So this is where you find Pluralsight, but
Mhm.
also you find this education option called Upskility.
Ah,
If you
okay.
find them there, consider yourself a really, really lucky guy. They are
Okay.
really good. They have when I'm talking about really good, I'm talking so their main focus is mainly it's mainly Azure, but they're very good.
Okay. And, what's the name again?
Upskility. So
Ah,
OPS Upskility. These guys.
okay.
Upskility. They have
Ops. Ah, ops. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Upskility. Yeah. So their main focus is on
Okay.
Azure on Microsoft Cloud, but they're very
Ah,
good. Their labs. They are not just throwing random labs at you. These are like meaningful labs that you actually use in the real world. So
okay.
if you find that under your MSDN benefits, I tell you, you're lucky person. They're really
Ah,
good. So I'll just throw that out there. And then basically, yeah, let's move on a little bit. Oh, I can
okay.
see we've got somebody else joined. Who is joined? Leon, how you doing, Leon? You all right? You're muted in case you want to speak. Just feel free to unmute yourself and speak. Okay, so today I just want to quickly run through, at least this is an introduction, so we won't go into too much details, but let's start from information about how we can start testing Azure, how we can start making use of it, some of the benefits that we'll have from it. So one of the things that I would like to start with is to mention quickly what we'll cover in this entire series, or what I'm looking to cover in this entire series. And for that, I'll bring up this. Let's go to Microsoft Learning. I'll bring up quickly this Microsoft PowerPoint. And I'll just quickly run through this because we'll be following the Microsoft official course curriculum, right? And these are the things that we'll cover. So we'll start by discussing Introduction to Azure, which we'll probably do part of this today and continue next time. Then we'll move on to cover implementing and managing Azure networking, um, which we're talking about VNets and all the other interesting stuff. Then we'll talk about implementing Azure virtual machines, managing virtual machines in Azure. Yeah. And sometimes people may go, yeah, virtual machines, are they just not virtual machines? Believe me, there are differences um, with on-prem. Some differences with on-prem and when you're talking about virtual machine in Azure. There are some things that you have to consider on Azure that you may not have to consider on-prem. Sometimes things work a little bit differently. For example, whenever you're deploying any machine, one of the things you're concerned about is how do I deploy the machine, right? So usually if you're doing that, you're doing things like if you're doing that on-prem, you're using something like SCCM or whatever, right, to automate your deployment. So if you're talking about automation, you're talking about how do I automate my deployment of my machines, of my servers. But then after you deploy the servers have to be configured, right? So you go, how do I automate the configuration of my servers, right? So that's post-deployment configuration. And then how do I automate the normal day-to-day management of my servers? So as you can tell, this can be a bit different from what we know about on-prem and in this totally different environment. And it is different. So some of those differences we'll talk about in implementing and managing. So this is not just how to start and shut down a VM. This is really useful stuff about things you need to consider when dealing with VMs in Azure. Then we talk about this thing called Azure App Service. So this is one of the things where you begin to see different frameworks on Azure. So for example, if you want to run a website, there are different ways that you can get that done on Azure. One of the things you can do is you can go deploy a virtual machine using the skills that we'll learn in Module 3. You can deploy a virtual machine, install Apache or IIS on the virtual machine, stand up deploy your website to the web server and all that stuff. And you can automate the whole process as we'll see. But there's also something else where you could go, you know what, I don't want to be taking care of this virtual machine. All I want is I want to be able to deploy my website. In that case, things like Azure App Service will be of interest to you because Microsoft will even take away your responsibility of managing the virtual machine. And now all you're just concerned about is managing your code. So you write your website code, you go to Microsoft, you have a web portal, you say, I want to deploy my code to PHP version 5 and Java version 6, this one, select the version that you want and click deploy. You don't have to worry about the VM and stuff. Microsoft will take care of all that. You just worry about your code. So we'll talk about that in Module 5. In Module 6, we'll talk about planning and implementing storage, backup, and recovery services. And one of the things that people throw out is, do you need backup on Azure? Like, I thought it's highly available, right? Because Microsoft has this huge data centers. I thought it's highly available. Yes, it's highly available. But one of the things that, again, we'll cover in this module is when we're talking about cloud principles. There are certain principles that you have to adhere to when deploying to the cloud. And one of those principles is always design your application or your services for high availability. So even though the probability of a Microsoft data center completely failing may be very low, it's not zero, right? Microsoft data center, who knows? One day you may hear, for example, I know AWS had a funny one recently. AWS, actually, let's look at AWS S3 SLA. This is a funny one. AWS S3 SLA, and I think AWS S3 SLA is the only SLA where they have it at 100%. I think if that comes up. So monthly uptime equal to or greater to 99%. Oh, did they change it? Amazon S3 SLA. Oh, monthly uptime equal to. Oh, they've changed it. I think it used to be 100%. Last updated. Wow, maybe I'm missing something. AWS S3 SLA 100%. I think they maybe it's not. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe it's not. What's it called? Maybe it's not S3. Maybe they have a different. Oh no, it's not S3. I think it's maybe Route 53. Um, AWS Route. This is useful information, so bear with me. AWS Route 53 SLA. Let's see. Um, and let's see what the SLA is for Route 53. Yeah, look at this. Definitions 100% available means that Amazon Route 53 did not fail to respond to your. Or what does that mean? Okay, 100% available. Let's see. Let's see. Where do they have the information written somewhere? Definitions. Um, do they have it listed somewhere? Oh, here we go. Look at this. Let's expand this. Look at service commitment. AWS we use commercially reasonable efforts to make Amazon 53 100% available, right? In the event Amazon 53 does not meet the foregoing commitments, you'll be eligible to receive a service credit as described below. So in other words, AWS have built this infrastructure that they're so sure about that they're giving a 100% SLA. And they're saying if something were to happen where it's not 100% available, now you have to ask them proper questions to make sure you understand what they mean by available, right? But they're saying in the case if it's 100% available, you can claim service credit. But just a few months ago, like about 4 5 months ago, AWS Route 53 had trouble in I think the American region, right? And there were delays in AWS Route 53. That's one that the service provider said will make this 100% available, and yet there was failures, and that was a global service. So what I'm trying to get across here is the main thing that principles of cloud design is always designed for high availability, right? In other words, if Microsoft data center were to fail completely, you should be able to be operational. And that's what one of the things that we'll be talking about in module 6. Now in module 7, we start talking about SQL. Start talking about planning and implementing Azure SQL database. Again, this is different. If I wanted SQL in Azure, there are different ways I could do it. I could go to, if I go to the previous slide, I could go deploy a VM, install SQL Server on it, and start managing it. Or I could actually just go to use this service called Azure SQL Database. This is not talking about you have a VM with SQL Server installed, even though that's it in the backend. This is talking about a service where you're just consuming the database without responsibility of managing the VM. So that's what we're talking about in Module 7. Module 8, we start talking about this thing called cloud services. These are awesome for web applications. And then Module 9, we're talking about Azure Active Directory. Now, Azure Active Directory is one of the, in my opinion, wrongly named services of Microsoft Azure. They've called it Azure Active Directory, and instantly, if you're a Microsoft guy in any way, you're thinking Active Directory. Only for you to find out Azure Active Directory has nothing to do with Active Directory. Has nothing to do with Active Directory. And then what now happened is this. Let's go. Let me bring up Paint, MS Paint. What now ends up happening in the cloud is this, is you'll find out that Microsoft has this service that really doesn't have much to do with what you call Active Directory. They call it Azure Active Directory, which really doesn't have much to do with Azure Active Directory. Then they decided to release another service. They call it Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which now we're now talking about something similar to what we know as Active Directory, but it's not. It doesn't have all the features of the Active Directory that we're used to on premises, but it has some of the features. But then they now say, okay, oh, you also have the option of Active Directory on Azure. Now you're now fully confused, right? You're now thinking, now Microsoft will now start releasing. They have tens of documentations out there to try to explain the differences between these. They've created the trouble by themselves by naming the services in this way. So now you have to follow up with about 10 different documentation explaining what are their differences, why they're not the same, what this one is for, what the other one is for. Just name this one something else. Azure Identity is a good name, right? Because that's what it does. It's just Azure Identities, but they've called it Azure Active Directory. Now you're confused, and now they're like, oh, okay, no. What you want to do, you have to go use Azure Active Directory Domain Services. And you're like, okay, but you also have the option for Active Directory on Azure. So thank you, Microsoft. Any questions so far from just the introduction that I'm giving of what we are covering? Any questions from anyone? Welcome, Maya. How are you doing? You may need to unmute yourself if you want to speak. You're muted, Leon and Maiwa, and so if you want to speak,
Yeah. All right, okay. Thank you for having me, and thanks
y-
for running Azure because I was just freaking out. As in, what exactly is this?
yeah.
Yeah,
Have
this
you
is a
have
good
you
feature.
experienced that before? Have you tried to do some research on Microsoft Azure Active Directory and found
That
out?
was actually what killed it. I was trying to do. I saw that
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
because I was trying to go through the admin end to see what it is
Hmm.
without going through without really certifying for it. I was like, okay, let me just get my hands dirty on it and then start preparing for certs on it. I'm like,
Yeah,
what are they talking about?
yeah.
Uh, Active Directory. What is what? I just gave up.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So they've got like all this different stuff. So we covered that. So that's something that we'll cover when we get to module 9. So we'll talk about what Azure Active Directory is. And then you see instantly they move to module 10, which is managing an Active Directory infrastructure in a hybrid environment, which is different from Azure Active Directory. Then module 11 will talk about implementing Azure-based management and automation. One of the principles when we're talking about cloud principles of cloud design principles is to automate as much as you can. And one of the reasons for that is, for example, when you're moving away from a traditional environment and you're moving to this cloud environment, you should be able to have your application and services designed in such a way that if a service were to fail 2 a.m. at night, or if a server were to fail 2 a.m. at night, it will self-heal itself. So it's called a self-healing design principle. So it will self-heal itself without any human intervention. Somebody said, how do you know if you're doing your design wrong on Azure or on AWS or any other platform or any other cloud platform? He said, if something were to go down and you actually have to have a human intervention to fix it, something is not right. So things should be able to self-heal themselves, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about when we talk about Azure automation in module 11. So there are ways that you could use services that may be difficult for you to get on-prem, but there are ways for you to get services that you can use to automate not only Azure deployment, post-deployment configuration, even day-to-day management, and even recovery if there were to be a failure. Okay, so those are the things that we'll be covering in this particular series. So let's start first of all with module 1, which is Introduction to Microsoft Azure. With this one, the thing that we'll start with is, first of all, you need to get yourself an Azure account. If you're going to be following with what we're doing, you probably need to get an Azure account. So there are different ways to get an Azure account. Just go search for Azure trial account and go sign up for an Azure trial account. So you go search for Google Azure trial account. I click on create an Azure account. Now I've already used this, so I can't use it again. So Microsoft will give you $200 dollars credit for free for 30 days. So what that means is if you finish the $200 within 5 days, that's it. If you don't finish the $200 and it's 30 days, that's it also. So whichever comes first, the $200 or the 30 days. So go sign up for this if you've not used this before. Now, if you've signed up for this before, you cannot sign up for it again, at least using the same account. So you can only sign up for a free trial once per account. Now, what Microsoft have now begun to do is they're linking this with your credit card. So when you're signing up, even though it's for a free trial, they will ask for your credit card information. If you put in the same credit card that you've used before to sign up for a free trial, you might get an error message and it won't allow you to sign up. So if you've previously signed up for Azure trial and then you want to sign up again, what you need is you need a different credit card this time and a different account to be able to sign up. So that's one option. The other option that you have is this thing called IT Pro Cloud Essentials, which the last time I looked, I think they've stopped this or they paused it. Sometimes they pause it and then come back to it. So Microsoft Cloud Essentials, which if you've not signed up for before, go sign up for it. It's completely free. They've probably stopped the free Azure. So you sign up for Microsoft IT Cloud Essentials. One of the things that you get as part of signing up for this is you get Azure credit. So on the product, so they've stopped it because this is talking about the Azure free trial. But what they used to do is they used to give $20 every month for 1 year. So unfortunately, I think they've paused this for now. So this is just talking about the Azure free trial. So, and there are other different ways to get Azure credit for you to be able to practice what we're talking about in this. So apart from the free trial or IT for Cloud Essentials, One way also is MSDN subscription, which I've discussed with Sven earlier. So if your company happen to have an MSDN subscription, or it's now called a Visual Studio subscription. So Visual Studio subscription. And if I just go Visual Studio benefit comparison. So compare Visual Studio product offerings. So let's see the options that are available in Visual Studio. So what you can do is if your organization already pays for this is really good because as part of that benefit for your organization has paid for this, you get certain amount of Azure credit every month that you can spend. Oh, and something seems to be wrong. Okay, yeah, it's responding now. Yeah, here we go. So you have Visual Studio Community, Professional, and Enterprise. And then you see some of the different, is it this one? No, not this one. No, this is not Visual Studio that I want. So one Visual Studio, what's it called? Visual Studio, let's search for it again. Visual Studio subscription benefit comparison. So that's different from mm, so that's not talking about Microsoft Visual Studio itself. Oh, this one. So here we go. So Visual Studio pricing. So if you go for example, the Visual Studio Enterprise and Professional is what you have. If your company, if you're lucky, would work for a company where they pay for this for you, they are paying 2,999 per year, or they're paying 250 per month. Or if they've paid for this for you, they've paid 539 per year, or they're paying 45 per month. But as part of this, one of the benefits that you get is you get for the $3,000 one, you get 150 $150 of credit every month. For the 539 per year option, you get $50 credit every month. Now, these benefits are not available if you're using the per month option. So they're only available if you're using the yearly option. So, but this is one way to get Azure credit that you can use to practice. Another way is the one that I'm actually going to be using for all my demonstrations in this whole series is a Microsoft certified trainer, and as part of that, I get about $60 every month, something like that. So that's one other way. But there are different ways out there. Just search for online for Azure free credit. You see different other options that you can use to get Azure free credit. Another way is to go for a Microsoft conference. Go for a Microsoft event. Doesn't have to be a full conference like that. One of those free conferences. One that I posted more recently is the Microsoft Tech Summit. Tech Summit. And what if, for example, if you were to attend one of these, what Microsoft would do is they will give you something called Azure Pass, Microsoft Azure Pass. And that Azure Pass is a voucher that you can use to, so I think it will give you about $70 credit that you can use for this in the space of 60 days or something like that. So they'll give you that, but again, you can only use one Azure Pass per subscription forever. So if I've used an Azure Pass voucher for my subscription, and then I get another Azure Pass voucher, I'll need to open a new account. And then I get another Azure Pass voucher, I'll need to open a new account. I can't keep adding Azure Pass to the same account. I need to open a different account. Now, is that clear? Any questions so far regarding the options for you to start getting your hands dirty on Microsoft Azure? Any questions at all?
I do have a question.
Yes,
Can you
please.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So, the question is, you did mention the fact that it's linked to the credit card, but I was trying to create an account right now,
Yeah.
and it's requesting for my phone number. Is that also tied to it?
No, I think it's mainly the credit card. So
Because
if you,
because it
yeah,
says it's going to send an identification verification to my
yeah,
phone.
yeah,
So I was thinking if I'm going to create a new account next time,
yeah.
and then use that, maybe
It
maybe try
may
to
for
okay.
that. Yeah, from what
Uh,
I'm aware of, I think it's mainly the credit card. I'm not sure, maybe if they've now changed something, but from what I'm aware of, it's mainly the credit card that so once you use your credit card to sign up for this one and then you go try to use it again, it does that check and it's like, no, you're not gonna use this credit card. You're not gonna use this credit card again.
okay. All right. And we
Yeah.
can also buy credits,
Yeah,
I
we
think,
we can pay as you
individually.
go. Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that we'll talk about. So yeah, you we can, but if you're just gonna be doing dev and testing, there are many options out there that may not involve necessarily buy. So if people want to buy, for example, like rather than buying for stuff, I'll probably go something like this, like the Visual Studio one, because again, this just gives you it just gives you much more than just Azure credit, right? So for example, if you get this one, you get $50 Azure credit every month. Now, if you think about it for a year, that's 600. So that's more than the cost of this one. But also as part of that, you get all these different tools. You get other benefits like Pluralsight. You get Pluralsight training, 40 courses for 12 months. You get Obscurity. There's the one I was talking about, Sven, Obscurity, full subscription for 6 months. So you get way much more than just the credit. So if people are contemplating buying, I'll probably go for this model rather than just go, let's just start paying Microsoft. If you're especially if you're going to be doing testing, because you get much more with this one than buying individually. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Hello?
Yes, it does.
Oh,
It answers
sorry.
my
Yeah,
question.
no problem.
Thank you.
No problem to start. And feel free, anyone, if you have any question at any time, feel free to stop me and just let's go through this together. Okay, so now those are the options that you have to get your hands dirty. And once you sign up, um, one of the things that you get is you get access to this portal over there. So let's talk about this portal over here quickly. So one of the first thing is that once you sign up for Azure, you get an Azure subscription, what's called an Azure subscription. Now, the Azure subscription that you get, there are different ways to access it. One way is through this portal here called portal.azure.com that I'm using to access it. But there's also another way. If I go to https manage.windowsazure.com and I press enter to that, it's going to load a different portal for me, which is different from this portal. And this is very important to understand this, is that um, this old portal that I went to called manage.windowsazure.com is what is known as the legacy portal or the old Azure portal or the legacy Azure portal. We'll talk about other names for it. They also call it the service management portal. This new portal, of course, it's called the new portal. It's also called the resource manager portal, and we'll talk about what that means later. So for example, if you log into this one, you can see right at the top here, it's already telling you, check out the new portal. That's where you should be going. Now, if you're doing this and you're preparing for the exam, recommendation is to do all your practice and test on the new portal because the exams have been updated to reflect the new portal. So in the past, it used to be that there are certain things that you cannot do on the new portal yet, but you can do on the old portal. That is largely untrue nowadays. So for example, in the past, Azure Active Directory is one that you need to go to the old portal to still be able to manage. But they've moved that into the new portal now. So over here, you can see Azure Active Directory now, and I can manage Azure Active Directory from here. So overall, recommendation is to use the new portal, not the old portal, whenever you want to start managing your Azure subscription. Um, so one of the things with this new portal is just to give you some quick tips. Now on the left hand side, you have all these different tabs. Um, I can click on the more services here, and any tab that I want to show up over here, I can click the star to add it. So for example, there's resource groups, which is starred over here. If I want to remove it from showing up over here, I can just remove the star, and whichever one I remove the star, you can see it disappears from here. I remove billing, help and support. So the only thing I want to really show on the left hand side, they are the ones, in other words, things that I use more frequently. I use resource group more frequently. I use all resources to view all my resources frequently. I use dashboard to quickly go back to the dashboard so I can select them. One of the other things that you may also have noticed here is you notice there are some options here that appear twice. Virtual machines classic, for example. Now, one of the main reasons why the old portal still exists is for backward compatibility. So sometimes people have created virtual machines and they have their whole production infrastructure already set up in this old portal, right? And people don't want to be bouncing back and forth between two portals. In which case, what Microsoft has said is, we'll give you links to be able to manage your resources that you created on the old portal from the new portal. So if you've created virtual machines from this old portal and you want to be able to manage them from the new portal, you can use Virtual Machines Classic. So whenever you see Classic in bracket, that's talking about the old portal, resources that were created with the old portal. OS Disk Classic, VM Images Classic, and you can go down and down that way, Virtual Networks Classic, and that's what that means. One of the other good things to know, for example, is if you don't like this color scheme that I'm using, you can just double click on the screen anywhere and it's going to change to the different color schemes that are available to you. So if in case anyone is colorblind or anything like that, there are different options that you can change to. You don't have to use that same option. And one of the other things I'd like to show to you also is, apart from this portal, I can go to a different URL. Now, one thing you get familiar with it with Azure is there are lots of different URLs that you have to know. So it's called account, not with a S, without any S, account.azure.com. So I go to account without the S, singular.azure.com, and I click on sign in. Because I've already signed into Azure before, it's going to use my same credentials and sign me into account.azure.com. Account.azure.com is where I'll largely manage my subscription and my billing. Let me show you what I mean by that. So once this logs in, I'll show you quickly what I mean by this. It's a bit slow because it's still using the old portal also. It's really, really slow, but you'll get there eventually. So we'll just give it a bit more time. That's very slow, right? That's super, super slow. Yeah, it's doing something now. And here we go. Yeah, come on, you can do it. Manage, account.azure.com. So the first one we looked at is portal.azure.com, which is the new one, which is the one that you should focus on if you're going to be doing your practice. We talked about manage.windows.azure.com, which is the old one, which is legacy, mainly still exists for backward compatibility, and the account.azure.com, which is where you manage your subscription and your billings. So this is where if your manager were to request for a report that shows, hold on, I just got a bill for $1,000 this month. What happened? How did we spend $1,000? And you want to drill down into your account and find out what you were charged for, you can use this portal. So this one, so for example, one of the first things that I'll see once I log in is that I see my current subscriptions. So for example, you can see I've used IT Pro Cloud Essentials and it's currently disabled. I have MSDN platforms, which is the one I'm using now, which is the one I get for being a Microsoft certified trainer. I've used free trial on this account before and it's now cancelled. I've used an Azure Pass voucher on this account before and it's now cancelled. So once I see this, I cannot sign up for a free trial on this account again. Never. I cannot get an Azure Pass voucher and activate it successfully on this account again. So you can only activate it once. So all the free options, you can only use them once per account. So IT Pro Cloud Essentials benefits. So once that's expired, because I've spent all the $20 they gave me this month, so that's why it's disabled. Once that expired, it goes under here, it goes under cancelled, and I cannot use IT Pro Cloud Essentials anymore. So this is where you see your current subscription, you can tell what you have. So I click on my subscription, which is MSDN platforms, and it takes me into the subscription itself. And I want to start drilling down because I'm looking at this and looking at my credit status. It tells me, David, you got £12 available and you have 11 days left before you get your new credit. So if I want to find out how come I've got only £12 left and I want to drill down, I can click on my subscription and now I'm here. And one of the things that I can do is on this side here, you can see I can download my usage details, right? Or the other thing is it gives me an overview of what I've currently spent my money on. So for example, I can see scrolling down, I can see compute hours that I've used in EU West has cost me 32 in this subscription month. Premium storage that I've used in US East has cost me £4, and I can drill down and see what's taking my money. And then if I want more details, because this one will only give me an overview, I'm like, okay, I want to understand exactly what computer that I've used that's cost me £32. I can go download the usage details here, and then it's going to take me to a place where I can select which period I want to download the details from. So let's say I want the current period. So download version 1 or version 2. I'll download version 2, which is in preview. And it's going to download them in form of a CSV file, and which will give me full details of how the money have been charged. So I can see that if I need to. One other one I want to show you is this alert option here. So this alert option is useful for you, especially if you're using your own credit card or whatever, and you want to be alerted once you hit a certain threshold with spending. So this one is a very good one for that. So you can set alerts. So one of the things that I've set on mine is if my billing goes, if I have just £20 left, I'll get an email to say, hey, David, you've got only £20 left. Your money is finishing quickly. So I can add alerts if I need to also. I can add different types of alerts. You can see I can only set up to 4 alerts. Any questions regarding those before we move on? Any question at all? Everything clear so far? Yep. Yep. Okay, good, good. Everything clear so far. Okay, so now that we've covered, getting your Azure subscription, knowing how to at least begin to interact with your Azure subscription, the portals to look for. Now let's talk about for this course itself, and this probably where we'll probably pause for today, and then we'll come back next time, and then we'll pick up from there, and then we can move really quickly. Once we get the foundation, the basic things down, we can move quickly. So preparing your Azure test environment, it's not just any machine that you can use to really, especially if you're going to be testing for the exam, and especially if you want to really know what you're doing, you can't just use any machine to test. And my recommendation would be to have, this is just plainly my own recommendation. You can use something less if you want to. A Windows 10 or Server 2016 machine with internet access. A minimum of 16 gig of RAM. You say, David, what are we doing? Is it not just accessing a portal? No, it's not just accessing a portal. We're doing more than that. One of the things that you begin to see is that on this machine, what do we install? Instantly, I've put in here, install Microsoft SQL 2016. Of course, you can install any later one than 2016 if you want. And you go in, why do I need to install SQL 2016? The reason is because you will be hosting databases in this course. We will be hosting databases in this course because one of the labs that we'll cover is if you have a Microsoft SQL database on-prem and you want to move it into this service. Remember, it's a service. It's not a virtual machine that you're interacting with. It's a service called Azure SQL Service. And you want to move your database from this database that you're hosting and you're having to manage the OS, you're having to manage the server, you want to move it to this cloud managed Azure SQL database. How are you going to practice that without having a database that you can practice with? So that's why you need this. That's why I've put 16 gig of RAM. There's a lot of stuff to test. There's a lot of stuff to practice. So we'll have this machine, Windows 10 or Server 2016, that has a minimum of 16 gig of RAM. We'll install Microsoft SQL Server on it. Again, people that are not aware, I'll probably repost that below. The link to this document that I'm going through can be found over here. Actually, I'll just copy. Yeah, let's click on that. and I'll copy it and I'll post it again. So if you need that document, because I've added a lot of links and I'll keep editing that as I'm adding more content to that. So we'll have SQL Server installed. We'll have SQL Server Management Studio installed because again, one of the things that we'll be doing is, so what now happens if you're hosting your SQL Server in this service called SQL Database? How are you going to be able to access this if you need to access it, maybe pull up some tables or whatever? How can you be able to access it? We'll demonstrate how you can use SQL Server Management Studio to connect directly to this Azure SQL database. So those are the reasons why we need that. Microsoft Visual Studio. You're going, David, I'm not a developer. What are you talking about? You're talking about databases and Visual Studio. You will need to have Visual Studio installed on your test machine because one of the things that we'll be doing is we'll have a website that will build, a very, very simple website that will build from within Visual Studio. And from within Visual Studio, we'll deploy that website straight into Azure using the Azure integration and services that Visual Studio offers. And this is important to know if you're going to be an Azure admin. You have to know all these different processes that are available. So from within Visual Studio, we'll create a website. One of the other things you can do with Visual Studio is you can actually start browsing into your Azure resources from Visual Studio, right? One of the things that we'll also be talking about is how to build your Azure infrastructure using these things called Azure ARM templates. Where are you going to write your Azure ARM templates? You can use PowerShell ISC to write them, but you won't get the benefit of something called IntelliSense. IntelliSense is this. Is if I go to PowerShell ISC, for example, let's go PowerShell, and then if I bring up PowerShell ISC, come on, ISC, and it brings up the PowerShell ISC environment, the integration scripting environment. So this is where if I'm writing PowerShell, so it's kind of like somebody saying, why don't I write my PowerShell scripts in Notepad++? Why do I have to write them in PowerShell ISC? The answer is simple. It's IntelliSense. So for example, I go new hyphen, right? And as I can see all these options, it's giving me suggestions about that. So I can be selecting. And if I'm missing something, if I write a whole script and something is missing, PowerShell is pointing out to me that, hey, there's a red sign here. This one is not right. Now, when you're writing ARM templates and you're using PowerShell ISC, unfortunately, PowerShell ISC cannot read the schema of the ARM template to be able to tell you what is wrong or to be able to give suggestions of what to use to you. But Visual Studio has that, which is why the ARM template that I'll be writing will be writing it in Visual Studio, right? Hence why it's called DevOps, right? So you're development and you're also your operations, but you're also development. Okay, then you install this tool called Web Matrix. Now, if you're on IT Pro like me, you're probably thinking these are tools I've not heard of before, and they're sounding like developer tools. Yes, they had developer tools, but we'll have to be familiar with them when we're talking about Azure. So Web Matrix. So Web Matrix is a free cloud connected website builder, but it has an heavy integration with Azure. Again, we'll just use this to see different ways that we can interact with our Azure platform. We can push things down and pull things down and manipulate them directly from these different tools. Then you have to have Azure PowerShell installed. So Azure PowerShell and Web Matrix, you notice in bracket, I have this thing called Web Platform Installer in bracket. So let's talk about that quickly. Web Platform Installer. So let's go. I have it on this machine and I'll also just go online and I'll just search for it. And I'll show you what this means and why this is very good. So if I go online, I just search for Web Platform Installer and I press enter. And then, yeah, oh, okay, it's going to open it twice now. So Web Platform Installer, I click on it and then I go to, so I just search on Google and then I can go download it online. But I've already downloaded and installed on my machine, and hopefully in a few seconds time it should pop up and I'll show you what this can do. Because when talking about installing some of these things that we'll be needing in our test environment, some of them you can install using this tool called Web Platform Installer. It allows you to install a lot of the tools. So once it actually comes up, I can show you. Platform installer, where are you? So while it's coming up, let's move on. So we'll have Azure PowerShell installed. We'll also have Azure CLI installed. And one of the main reasons why we have this installed is mainly because PowerShell and CLI, they're basically the same function, but just different command line commands. So, but because in the exam, we will get questions around Azure CLI commands, so Microsoft expects us to be familiar with both. So we need to install this. And again, we can install this using Web Platform Installer. We can install this one using Web Platform Installer. We can install this one using Web Platform Installer. Okay, and then finally, we need GitHub, not GitGub. We need GitHub Desktop, and we need Git Shell. So just download it if you're using Linux or Windows. Download GitHub. I have it installed, downloaded on my machine, and I have a GitHub account. You say again, why do I need these GitHub things? Because we'll be using this to demonstrate source control. So for example, you're writing your Azure ARM templates. How are we going to take the Azure ARM templates and how are we going to put them in source control and then be able to deploy them? That's why we need something like GitHub. Just to show you a brief overview of this, if you just search online for Azure Quick Start template, you see this template, which are Azure ARM templates, which we'll talk about. So don't be afraid if any of this. Remember, we've not even started module one, so we're just starting. So there's a lot of stuff for us to cover. It take a lot of weeks, but we'll get there. So for example, I go Azure Quick Start template. I can see the templates are listed in order of complexity. 100, 101, which means more complex. Then you start going down to changes from 101 to 201, which is even more complex. And then down you get to 3 also, which is even much more complex. So I click on one of these templates. One of the options, you can see the integration that we can have between GitHub and Azure, where I could have my templates already written in and push down to my GitHub account. And then from there, I could just deploy them straight into my Azure infrastructure. So that's why we need all this installed. And I think this is where I'll probably pause for today because there's so much more to go through and I don't want to overwhelm us. So if you've not, I've just showed you the demo already of all this. Ensure that before our next Hangout, you have your Azure trial account, whatever way you need to get your trial account, go try to attend the Microsoft conference, get Microsoft Azure Pass, IT Pro Cloud Essentials, see if it's available now. MSDN Visual Studio subscription, whatever option, get your Azure account ready. Also, my recommendation for deploying your Azure test environment, rather than building your own machine, is go to your Azure portal, which I'll just quickly show you that now. Let me log into my Azure portal. Go to your Azure portal and add a new virtual machine. So I'll just quickly demonstrate this to you. So I'll search for Windows Server. So it doesn't have to be Windows 10. Remember that we'll have SQL installed, so it can be Windows Server. So I go to Windows Server 2016. So this is my recommendation for what you should use for your Azure Lab environment. Don't use your current machine. Just build the machine on Azure once you have your free trial account or any other MSDN account or whatever. So Microsoft Windows Server 2016, actually, I want it to show me the options. I don't want it to just go deploy. Windows Server 2016, and it's going to list all the different options for me of Windows Server 2016. One of the options is an option that has Visual Studio installed already. So you can see Visual Studio 2000 and Community 2007 latest release on Windows Server 2016. So that means if I deploy this, the deployment is a Windows 2016 deployment with Visual Studio Community already installed, right? So if you don't have MSDN subscription, don't try to deploy the one with Visual Studio Enterprise because it's going to ask you to enter an activation code. So just use the Community Edition, just deploy this one, and that will give you free Visual Studio Community. After you've now deployed this, so this is one that I'll recommend. So create this and deploy this. After you've now deployed this, make sure you select virtual machine size that I can call it something like my Azure test or Azure lab. Leave it as SSD. I want it to be as fast as possible. Give it a username and give it password.
David, one short question.
Yeah.
He's asking me for a deployment model, so for Classic or Resource Manager.
Always use Resource Manager. So whenever you hear the term Classic,
Yeah.
Classic is also legacy, is old.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
mainly there for backward compatibility. So always use resource management.
Okay.
Yeah. So going forward, they've updated the exam for resource management. So yeah. So I put it in a resource group for example, and that's a very good question by the way, Sven. Thanks for, because sometimes, you know, and Nuno will attest to this because Nuno mentioned that he works with Azure every day also. So what happens is you do a lot of this stuff, right? And sometimes you forget that not everybody work with it daily like you work with it, and you just go, oh yeah, it's resource manager, of course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's good to ask these questions so that if things are not clear, we can make them clear. So Azure Lab RG, I give it that name. Select the location I want to put it into, and we'll talk about this from the next one. And while this, I'll click OK to that. It's going to ask me the virtual machine side. I'll select one that has a minimum of 16 gig of RAM, as we mentioned, because I'll have all these different tools that I'll install on it to be able to practice the things that we need to practice. I won't select true vCPU because that seems small for me, so I'll go for something even better. Something that has maybe about 4 vCPU and maybe much more heavier. And let's look for something more interesting. If I may not find 16 gig of RAM directly, so in this case, I may eventually just go for something with 14 gig of RAM if I'm deploying Azure. So I think that's what I'll go for. I'll look for this one, DS3 V2, 4 vCPU, 14 gig of RAM. That will do. So usually when you're selecting the machine size, again, we'll talk about this when we get to the module where we're talking about implementing and managing virtual machines. Is different virtual machine sizes. You can see there's V3, which are the latest versions, but then you see there's V2, which are the mid versions, and then there's the one that doesn't have any V in front of them. So they come up with this machine sizes in versions. So there's version 1, there's version 2. The latest version is, of course, version 3. So if I find the version 3 that meets my requirement of what I want, I'll probably go for the version 3. This one seems to be meet my requirement. So you can see 4 vCPU, 16 gig of RAM, D4S V3. One other thing that you see is that as they release new versions, the prices seems to drop. So for example, look at the one I was going to select, DS3 V2. It has 4 vCPU and 14 gig of RAM, and that will cost me, if I leave it running 24 hours a month, which I won't, because once I create it and I'm not using it, I shut it down. It will cost me $150. But look at this one has more resources. It's got 4 vCPU and 16 gig of RAM, so there's 2 gig extra of RAM, and it costs less. So if you use the newer version, you can also save on cost there. So select that and just give it information. Sometimes I just leave the default for this. Make sure it has a public IP. Click OK to that, and then it's going to validate the template. We'll talk about this in module 4. So it's going to validate the template because we can download templates, but we won't go into that now. I click on purchase to purchase that, and then deployment start. So this will be my Azure test machine. And then I'll go through all the things that I've listed here and I'll install them on that. This will be my test machine. And once I finish, or once it finishes deployment, do not forget to do this. Once you're not using it, go under virtual machines, which if I go back under my services and make sure I select virtual machines because I use it a lot. So let's look for virtual. Oh yeah, it's still there. Just need to look for it. Where are you? Oh, that's virtual networks. Where are you, virtual machines? Let's go back. Virtual machines. Oh, here you are. It's hiding down, so I can drag and drop, move it up a bit. So when you finish deploying everything the way you want it, make sure you come from the portal. Don't do it from within the VM. From the portal, make sure you click on it and click stop. Because once you do this, then you're not charged anymore by Microsoft. If you do it from within the VM, you'll still be charged. Not everything, but you'll be charged for other things. So if you click stop from here, you don't get charged. So make sure after you finish the deployment, you stop it from there. So this is where we'll probably stop for today, but ensure you have all this ready before our next Hangout. And then the next Hangout will kick off with doing some really interesting stuff. Any questions regarding today at all?
We just need one virtual machine, or
Just
how many
one.
virtual machines
Just
do we
one.
need?
Yeah.
Just one with a Visual Studio.
Yeah, because remember that this is our test machine. So when we get to module Um, number 3 and 4, for example, will still create more VMs, right? But it doesn't matter. So this one is just just the machine that we'll be using to access our Azure portal and be doing all our tests in this whole course.
Okay.
So
Do we
this
have to install the SQL server, or do
Yep,
we?
you have to download and install SQL Server. So I recommend installing SQL Express. Now, unfortunately, in Azure, if you look at it, look at the options that you have when selecting a machine to deploy. I can go deploy Windows Server 2016. They will give me an option of a prepared machine that has Server 2016 and SQL, or a prepared machine that has Server 2016 and Visual Studio, but they don't have one that has Server 2016 with Visual Studio and SQL. So whichever one you feel more comfortable deploying. So if you're more comfortable with manually installing SQL Express, just deploy the one with Visual Studio and then install SQL Express after. If you're more comfortable with installing um, Visual Studio, install the one with SQL Express and then install Visual Studio after.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we install it on a local machine, right?
No, on
So
this machine, on the same
on
machine.
this machine.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this will be your test machine that you're going to be using for this entire course. So
So we
this test
install
machine,
everything
yeah,
on the other machine.
on this machine that you just
Yeah.
deployed. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Wow.
everything. So whenever we come next time, what we'll do is we'll start the machine, we'll log into it via RDP, and that's what we'll be doing all our labs and our tests.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay.
David,
Hello. Hi.
sorry, one last question. Those
No problem.
documents, are they available
Yeah,
for
so I
us?
posted the link. I'll post the link again.
Oh,
Or
okay.
can
No
somebody
worries. I'll
help
have
me
a
to
look.
post the link if you've got the stuff? Can you help me to just post the link for Leon? So Leon's go access. Let's go. Oh, sorry, it's Shola. Sorry, I thought it was Leon. So I'll copy that. Uh,
Yeah, I posted it.
oh, thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Okay, I've got it.
Yeah,
Thanks for that,
Yeah,
Daniel.
no
I have
problem.
a question though.
Yeah.
Well, I think I took my eye off the ball
Mm.
briefly while you were going through how to set up the virtual machine,
Yeah.
and I tried doing that, and it's telling me it's going to cost me $1,100 and something
You
a
probably
month. So
selected a different size. So the size that I select was
I,
DS3V3,
I'm,
something like that.
my screen actually looks different from yours. I think I'm on the HTTPS Azure. Should I be on the portal?
Oh yeah, you should be
Oh,
on
I should.
portal.windows.azure.com.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
use the new
That's fine.
portal for everything you'll be doing going forward. The exam has been updated for the new portal. So use the new portal always. So yes, on the new portal, the option that I selected, it has 4 CPUs and 16 gig of RAM, and it costs $133 dollars per month. But again, remember, this is not something that cost is if you leave that VM running 24/7, right? But that's not what we're going to be doing, because once I finish testing whatever I need to test, I'm going to come here and and one of the things that we'll be talking about is we'll be talking about how you can save some costs with this. So where you can, for example, click on this machine, for example, I can configure things like automatic shutdown. So I can say, hey, shut down this virtual machine at this time of the day in case I leave it running. So, but yeah, once whatever I finish, whenever I want to do, I'm not going to leave it running. So I'll click on that and I'll come here and I'll click stop from within the Azure portal, and then I won't be charged for it. You don't want to stop it from within the VM. You want to stop it from out here. Okay, any other questions before we call it a day?
Is this recorded?
Yeah, it is recorded and I will post it.
Thank you.
No problems at all.
And can you just show again where to shut down the virtual machine again? Is it under all resources?
So
Or?
you can do it, you can go to all resources or you can select the virtual machines tab.
Okay.
Yeah, so virtual machines tab. So
Okay,
yeah,
I see.
so once you click on virtual machines tab, it lists all your current virtual machines. You click
Uh-huh.
on the virtual machines that you want to shut down, and then you can click on stop here to stop it.
Okay, I see.
Also, after you click on the virtual machine, you have the option down here to configure auto shutdown.
Auto shutdown.
Yeah.
Just in case you
You forget.
right?
Yeah.
Just as an emergency trigger.
Exactly. So just to configure that so that it automatically shuts down at this time. So
Okay.
yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, then. So we'll call it a day. Oh, and then next, so just 1 hour exactly. That's nice. So next week when we continue the Hangout, we'll start doing some real useful stuff. So speak to you next week then. Have a nice evening or nice day.
All right.
You too.
You too.
Thanks for that, guys.
Thank you.
No problems at all.
See you later.
Bye for now.